The cashier didn't just laugh, she called her manager. The manager didn't just refuse, he pointed at the door. And the woman behind her didn't just watch, she started recording. All because a mother with 3 crumpled dollar bills had asked for a birthday cake for her 4-year-old son. People laughed. The boy held her hand tighter. She said nothing. The man in the gray suit behind her slowly lowered his phone. What was happening in that bakery? Nobody there understood. But he had been waiting for it. Her name was Nkechi Adaora Okoro. She was 34 years old, 5'3", and weighed 112 pounds because she had been skipping dinner for 5 months, so her son could eat twice a day. She was wearing a blue dress she had bought from a thrift store on South Boulevard for $2. The dress was clean. She had washed it by hand the night before in the bathroom sink because the washing machine in the basement of her apartment building had been broken since November, and the landlord had stopped pretending he was going to fix it. Her shoes were brown flats with a crack along the left sole that let water in when it rained. She had stuffed the crack with a folded piece of newspaper that morning, but it had already shifted. She carried a cloth purse her grandmother had sewn by hand in 1986 in Enugu, Nigeria. Dark brown fabric with small yellow flowers stitched along the edge in thread that had faded from gold to pale amber over the decades. Inside that purse were $3 bills, a state ID with an address she would not be living at in 2 weeks, a house key, and a folded piece of paper she had not looked at in 11 years. She did not know it yet, but that piece of paper was worth more than everything in the bakery she was about to walk into. The bakery was called Bellerose Patisserie. It sat on East Trade Street in Charlotte, North Carolina, between a jewelry store that sold engagement rings starting at $3,000 and a hair salon that charged $250 for a wash and set. Bellerose had been open for 8 years. It had won the Charlotte Magazine Award for Best Bakery 4 times. It sold wedding cakes that started at $400 and went up to $2,000. Custom birthday cakes that started at $75. Seasonal macarons at $4 each, arranged in glass cases like jewelry. The cheapest item in the display was a single cupcake for $6.50. Vanilla bean with Swiss meringue buttercream, displayed on a tiny marble pedestal as though it were something precious. Nkechi had not known any of this when she walked in. She had never been inside Bellerose. She had never walked down this stretch of East Trade Street before today. She was only here because the number 9 bus had been rerouted due to construction on Brevard, and this was the closest stop to the free clinic where Emeka had a checkup at 2 o'clock. She had seen the window display, a tall pink cake shaped like a castle with white frosting towers and tiny edible pearls, and a sugar figurine of a princess on top. And her son, Chukwuemeka, whom everyone called Emeka, had stopped walking and pressed his face against the glass and whispered, "Mama, can I have one for my birthday?" His breath made a small circle of fog on the window. She looked at that circle and saw her entire life inside it. She should have kept walking. She knew that. $3 would not buy anything in this place. But Emeka had never had a birthday cake. Not once. Not for his first birthday, which they spent in a shelter on Statesville Avenue where the lights went off at 9, and the woman in the next bed coughed all night. Not for his second, which fell on the same Tuesday they moved into the apartment on West Sugar Creek Road, the one with no hot water for the first 3 weeks. Not for his third, when she had bought a 6-pack of vanilla wafers from the Dollar General and stuck a single birthday candle into the top one and sang "Happy Birthday" to him, alone in the kitchen at midnight, because she did not want him to see her face in the light. She had cried that night, Not in front of him. Never in front of him. And now he was turning 4 in 2 days, and he had asked her one time, with his whole face, eyes wide, voice small, one hand still pressed against the glass, and she could not make her feet keep moving past that door. So she walked in. The bell above the door chimed, and the moment she crossed the threshold, every person inside the bakery looked at her, the way people look at something that has wandered into the wrong room and does not yet know it. The cashier's name was Diane Pruitt. She was 26 years old, had worked at Bellrose for 3 years, and had a habit of measuring people by what they carried: their bag, their shoes, their phone. Her mother had taught her that. Diane's mother, Carol Ann Pruitt, had once told her at age 13, sitting in the parking lot of a Nordstrom in South Park Mall, that you could tell everything about a person's worth by their shoes and their handbag. "Those two things never lie," Carol had said, adjusting her rear-view mirror. Carol had been wrong about most things in her life. Wrong about the man she married, wrong about the business she started, wrong about the daughter she raised to believe that the surface of a person was the same as the center. But Diane had held on to that one lesson like it was truth carved into stone. So when she saw Nkechi walk in, the cloth purse, the cracked shoes, the thrift store dress, the child in a coat that was visibly too large for his body, she had already made her decision before Nkechi opened her mouth. "Can I help you?" Diane said, but the way she said it meant the opposite. Nkechi walked to the counter. She set the 3 bills down. They were wrinkled and soft from being folded and unfolded too many times. "Can I get a birthday cake for my son?" she said quietly. "Something small, with his name on it. His name is Amika." Diane looked at the $3. She picked up one of the bills and held it between 2 fingers like it was wet. She looked at Nkechi with an expression that wasn't confusion. It was amusement. And then she laughed. Not a quiet laugh. A loud one, sharp and high and deliberate. The kind that fills an entire room and forces every other person in it to decide whether to join in or look away. The woman arranging flowers near the window looked up. The couple at the marble table paused. A man reading a newspaper folded it in half and watched. "Ma'am," Diane said, still smiling, "our cakes start at $75. She said it the way someone says the word, obviously. Then she pushed all $3 back toward Nkechi with one finger, like she was returning something that did not belong. What Diane Pruitt did not know, what no one in that bakery knew, was that Nkechi Adaora Okoro had once made cakes that people drove 45 miles across Durham County to taste. She had once run a kitchen that fed 200 people every Saturday morning. She had once been the reason a restaurant called Mama Obie's on Fayetteville Street in Durham had a 6-week waiting list. But that was before Tobias, before the silence, before she packed her hands away. And right now, before did not matter. Diane called the manager. His name was Brett Covington. He was 41 years old, wore a pink polo shirt tucked into pressed khaki pants, and had managed Bellrose for 6 years. He came from the back room wiping flour from his hands with a white towel, already irritated. Diane only called him to the front when something was wrong or someone was complaining about a price. He looked at the $3 on the counter. He looked at Nkechi. He looked down at Amika, who was standing perfectly still, holding his mother's hand with both of his own, his eyes moving between the adults' faces the way children do when they are trying to understand something they can feel but cannot name. Brett sighed. Not a small sigh, a performance. "Ma'am," he said, I think you might be more comfortable at the grocery store down the street. Harris Teeter. They have sheet cakes for about $8. That might be more in your price range. He pointed at the door, not with his finger, with his whole arm, a wide, sweeping gesture, like he was directing someone off his property. The woman behind Nkechi in line, a customer named Valerie Sims, 44 years old, wearing a white tennis bracelet and carrying a box of custom lavender macarons she had ordered for a bridal shower, pulled out her iPhone and started recording. She did not say a word. She just held the phone up and smiled. The smile of a woman who believed that someone else's worst moment was content. What happened next in that recording would eventually be seen by 2.4 million people. But that was still 3 weeks away. And the most important thing in the recording was not what anyone said. It was what one man standing at the back of the line did not say, and what he did with his silence after he walked out. Nkechi picked up her $3. She folded them carefully, one by one, and put them back in the cloth purse. Her hands were steady. Her face was still, not the face of a person holding back tears, but the face of a person who had decided that tears were not what this moment required. She looked at Brett. She looked at Diane. She did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She did not beg. She said one sentence. My grandmother could make a cake from nothing that would make your best baker quit. Then she turned around, took Emeka's hand, and walked toward the door. The boy looked up at her. He did not ask why they were leaving. He already understood more than a 4-year-old should have to, that sometimes the people behind the counter are not on your side, and that sometimes your mother's hand is the only safe thing in the room. The man in the gray suit, who had been standing 4 feet behind her the entire time, watching everything with an expression that had shifted from curiosity to recognition to something that looked like certainty, stepped aside to let her pass. He watched her leave. He watched the door close. He watched the small circle of fog from Emeka's breath disappear from the glass. Then he turned back to the counter. He did not say a word to anyone. He closed his portfolio, walked to the door, and left. But he was not walking away. He was beginning. His name was Solomon Bankole Adeyemi. He was 53 years old, born in Lagos, raised in 3rd Ward, Houston, educated at Cornell's School of Hotel Administration. He had spent 22 years building Adeyemi Collective, a food and hospitality group that owned 14 restaurants across the American South. His net worth was $41 million. The gray Tom Ford suit he was wearing cost more than Nkechi's rent for the year. He had come into Bellerose because he was considering buying it, part of a new division of artisan bakeries rooted in African and African diaspora traditions. He had walked in to evaluate pastry cases and lease terms. What he had witnessed changed everything, but not the way anyone would predict. He had calculated Bellerose's purchase price down to the last dollar. He had not calculated what would happen when a woman with $3 said something about her grandmother that made him put down his pen. Solomon did not confront Diane. He did not confront Brett. He walked to his car, a black Mercedes parked on the 2nd level of the Trade Street garage, and sat behind the wheel for 7 minutes without starting the engine. He watched Nkechi and Emeka walk toward the bus stop on the corner of East Trade and College. She was holding the boy's hand. The boy kept looking back at the bakery. Something about the way she walked, straight-backed, chin level, not performing strength but simply being it, reminded him of his own mother, Aduni Adeyemi, a woman who had raised 4 children in a 2-bedroom apartment in Houston's 3rd Ward and had never once let them see her bend. Not when the rent was late, not when the lights got cut off in August, not when their father left for Dallas and did not call for 6 years. Aduni had the same walk, the same chin, the same silence that was not defeat, but decision. Solomon drove back to his office on South Tryon Street, sat at his desk, and typed one name into a search engine: Obiageli Nwankwo Enugu. It took him 11 days to find what he was looking for, and when he found it, he understood that the bakery he had been searching for was never Belarus. It had been standing in front of him the entire time, carrying $3 in a purse made of cloth and ghosts. Nkechi's grandmother was named Obiageli Esther Nwankwo. She had been born in 1931 in Enugu, in the southeastern part of Nigeria. She never went to school past the age of 12. She could not read or write in English, but she could cook in a language that needed no translation, a language made of heat and timing and the precise distance between enough cayenne and too much. She had learned from her own mother and her mother's mother before that, in a kitchen with a clay stove and no running water, and by the time Obiageli was 20 years old, people in 3 villages knew her by name because of one thing: her chin-chin. Everyone in Enugu made chin-chin. It was common. It was everywhere. But Obiageli's chin-chin was different. She made it with fresh coconut milk, not canned, never canned, with nutmeg grated that same morning, a precise pinch of cayenne pepper that was not enough to burn, but just enough to make the tongue remember what it had tasted, and one more ingredient. Something she never told a living soul, something she wrote down once, just once, on a single piece of paper, in Igbo, in pencil, in handwriting so small you had to hold the paper close to your eyes to read it. She folded that paper into a tight square and placed it inside the lining of a cloth purse she had sewn herself out of brown fabric and yellow thread. That purse was now in Nkechi's hands. That folded paper was still inside the lining, exactly where Obiageli had placed it in 2009. And Nkechi had not opened it in 11 years, because the last time she had baked anything, her ex-husband, Tobias Chinedu Okoro, had thrown the baking tray across the kitchen floor, scattering chin-chin across the tile, and told her that no one, not one person on this earth, wanted to eat anything made by a woman who could not even keep a house clean. That was the night Nkechi stopped baking. She did not stop gradually. She stopped completely, the way a person stops breathing underwater. She put away the mixing bowls. She wrapped the wooden spoon, her grandmother's spoon, carried from Enugu to Durham in a suitcase, in a dish towel, and placed it in the back of a drawer. She packed the flour and the sugar and the cassava flour into a cardboard box and taped it shut and wrote nothing on the outside. She folded her grandmother's recipes, all 31 of them, dictated to her over 6 years of Saturday visits before Obiageli passed in 2013 at the age of 82, into a shoebox and slid it under the bed. Tobias had not hit her that night. He had never hit her. He had done something more precise. He had found the one thing she loved most in the world, the one act that connected her to every woman who came before her and made her believe it was worthless. She believed him for 7 years. She believed him through 2 apartments, 1 eviction, 1 restraining order filed at the Mecklenburg County Courthouse, and 1 custody hearing where Tobias did not show up because he had moved to Raleigh with a woman named Pamela and had not called Amika once in 14 months. He did not know his son could count to 20. He did not know Amika's favorite color was green. He did not know his son had never had a birthday cake. What Tobias also did not know, what even Nkechi had almost allowed herself to forget, was that Obiageli's recipes were not just recipes. They were formulas, each one measured to the gram, each one tested over decades, adjusted for humidity, altitude, the age of the flour, the ripeness of the fruit. Obiageli believed that food made with precision was food made with respect, and food made with respect could hold a family together across any distance. And one recipe in particular, a 3-layer cake made with cassava flour, palm sugar, and vanilla bean from a specific farm near Nsuka, was unlike anything in any bakery in the United States. Nkechi had made it once. She was 19. She had driven to her grandmother's house and baked it while Obiageli sat in a wooden chair and watched without speaking for 2 hours. When it was done, Obiageli tasted one bite, set down the fork, and said, "This is ready. You are not, but you will be." Nkechi had not understood what that meant then. She understood now. If this moment is landing the way I think it is, subscribe, so you don't miss what comes next. 11 days after the bakery incident, Nkechi was sitting in her apartment on West Sugar Creek Road, a 1-bedroom unit with a stove that only worked on 2 burners, a refrigerator that hummed so loud it woke Amika up 3 times a week, a window in the kitchen that did not close all the way and let in a thin line of cold air she had stuffed with a rolled-up towel, and a bathroom ceiling that had been leaking since March, but had been reported 4 times with no response when someone knocked on her door at 10:47 in the morning. She was not expecting anyone. She had no visitors. She had not had a visitor in this apartment in over a year. She walked to the door and looked through the peephole. A woman stood outside, short, brown skin, glasses with thin gold frames, a clipboard under her left arm, and an expression on her face that was calm and careful and patient. The face of someone who had knocked on doors before and understood that the person on the other side might not open it. Her name was Fatima al-Rashid. She was 39 years old, originally from Detroit, Michigan, and she worked as a talent scout and operations director for Adeyemi Collective. Solomon Adeyemi had sent her. "Ms. Okoro," Fatima said when the door opened. "My name is Fatima al-Rashid. I work for a company called Adeyemi Collective. I would like to talk to you about your grandmother's recipes." Nkechi almost closed the door. Her hand tightened on the handle. She had not talked about her grandmother's recipes to anyone. Not her neighbors, not the women at the free clinic, not the counselor at the shelter she had stayed at 3 years ago. The fact that a stranger was standing on her doorstep, using the word grandmother and the word recipes in the same sentence, made her chest tighten and her fingers go cold. But Fatima did not push. She did not lean forward. She did not try to wedge her foot in the door. She simply said, "I understand if you need a moment. I have nowhere to be. I can wait." And then she turned around, sat down on the concrete step outside the apartment, and waited. She did not look at her phone. She did not knock again. She sat with her clipboard on her knees and her hands folded on top of it, looking out at the parking lot where a stray cat was walking between the cars. After 4 minutes, Nkechi counted them on the clock above the stove, she opened the door again. "How do you know about my grandmother?" she said. Fatima told her. She told her about Solomon Adeyemi and his 22 years of building restaurants. She told her about Belarus and the scouting trip. She told her about the 14 restaurants across the South. She told her what Solomon had witnessed that day. Not just the humiliation, but the sentence Nkechi had spoken on her way out. And then Fatima said something that made Nkechi's knees give way. She sat down on the floor of her own hallway, her back against the wall, her hands in her lap. Mr. Adeyemi does not want to give you a job, Ms. Okoro, Fatima said. He wants to give you a kitchen. Nkechi did not say yes, not that day. She told Fatima she needed to think about it. Fatima left a business card on the step, plain white, black text, a phone number, and an email address, and said, "Take whatever time you need. I mean that." That night, after Emika fell asleep on the mattress they shared on the bedroom floor, there was no bed frame. There had not been one for 8 months, because she had sold it to a woman on Craigslist for $60 to cover the electricity bill in January. Nkechi sat alone in the kitchen. The apartment was quiet except for the humming refrigerator and Amika's slow, even breathing from the other room. She opened her grandmother's cloth purse. She turned it over in her hands. She ran her thumb along the yellow flowers stitched into the edge. Flowers that had once been bright gold and were now the color of old honey. Then she reached into the lining. She knew the exact spot, had always known, the way you know where a scar is on your body without looking. She pulled out the folded piece of paper. She had not touched it in 11 years. The paper was soft at the creases, brown at the edges, and smelled faintly of something she could not name but recognized. Something from her grandmother's kitchen, something from the house in Enugu, something from before. The handwriting was small and steady. Obiageli could not write, so Nkechi's aunt, Adaeze, had written the words down as Obiageli dictated them in Igbo. It was not just the chin-chin recipe. It was a note. The note said, "Nkechi, when the world makes you small, cook. They will taste who you are before they know your name." She read it 3 times. She pressed the paper against her chest and held it there, both palms flat over her heart, and sat on that kitchen floor for a long time, listening to the refrigerator hum and her son breathe and the faint traffic on Sugar Creek Road. She did not cry. She had stopped crying about things like this a long time ago. She stood up. She went to the cabinet under the stove, the one she never opened, the one she had taped shut because looking at what was inside made her feel like a person she was no longer allowed to be, and peeled the tape away and pulled out the shoebox. Inside were 31 recipes, each one handwritten. Each one dictated by Obiageli over 6 years of Saturday visits. 1 recipe per afternoon, always after tea, always with Obiageli sitting in the wooden chair by the window, while Nkechi wrote and tasted and asked questions. Each recipe was precise to the gram. She laid them out on the kitchen counter, one by one, in the order her grandmother had given them to her. She read the first, ground nut soup, then the second, jollof rice with smoked fish. By the 7th, the chin-chin. Her hands had stopped shaking. By the 15th, pepper soup with goat meat. She was writing a shopping list on the back of a gas bill envelope. By the 31st, the cassava cake. She had already called Fatima al-Rashid back. It was 11:42 at night. Fatima answered on the second ring. Solomon gave Nkechi a test kitchen inside one of his restaurant spaces, a location called The Yard on South Tryon Street in Charlotte, closed on Thursdays for prep and deep cleaning. It was a Thursday morning. He gave her $300 in cash for ingredients and told her to make whatever she wanted. No menu requirements, no guidelines, no limits. She went to the H-Mart on Central Avenue and the International Grocery Store on North Tryon and spent $211.47. She returned the remaining $88.53 in a white envelope with the receipt stapled to the front. Solomon looked at the envelope and the receipt and said nothing. He already knew. In 6 hours, working alone in a commercial kitchen designed for a team of 8, using borrowed equipment and ingredients she had selected herself, Nkechi produced the following. 1 3-layer cassava cake with palm sugar glaze, hand-scraped vanilla, and a crumb structure so fine it dissolved on the tongue before you could chew it. 1 batch of Obiageli's chin-chin, 47 pieces, each one identical in size, each one identical in color, each one carrying that precise ghost of cayenne pepper that arrived 3 seconds after the sweetness and stayed at the back of the throat like a warm whisper. 1 loaf of sweet potato bread with roasted plantain butter churned by hand. 1 coconut milk pudding with crushed roasted ground nuts and a thread of cayenne heat that sat at the back of the palate like a question waiting to be answered. And 1 pineapple upside-down cake made with fresh pineapple sliced that morning, dark muscovado sugar imported from Trinidad, and a batter so impossibly light it barely held its own shape until the oven gave it permission. Solomon brought in 4 of his head chefs to taste. He did not tell them who made the food. He set the 5 items on the counter and said, "Score them, 1 to 10. No discussion until you are done." The first, Gerald Hayes, who had run Solomon's Atlanta kitchen for 9 years, ate 1 piece of chin-chin, chewed it slowly, and did not speak for 11 seconds. Then he said, "Who made this?" Solomon did not answer. The second chef tasted the cassava cake and asked for the recipe. Nkechi, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed, said 1 word, "No." The third, Renee Beaumont, a pastry chef from New Orleans with 2 James Beard nominations, tasted the coconut pudding, set down her spoon, closed her eyes, and said, "Where has this woman been?" The fourth chef, Warren Okafor from Memphis, a man who rarely spoke, tried all 5 items, then went back and ate 4 more pieces of chin-chin without a word. Nobody stopped him. Solomon stood by the window, watching Nkechi. She was plating the last of the sweet potato bread, cutting it into even slices with a bread knife that was not sharp enough for the job. She did not pause. She did not struggle. She adjusted her pressure instinctively, compensated for the dull blade without thinking about it. The way a musician adjusts for an out-of-tune piano by hearing the note it should have been. Her hands moved the way his mother's had, fast, but never rushed, certain in a way that could not be taught or purchased or replicated, only inherited. He had seen 100 talented bakers in his 22-year career. He had hired 60 of them. He had opened kitchens in 6 cities. But he had never seen someone cook with this specific quality. The quality of a person who had been told they were nothing, and had believed it, and was now remembering in real time, with every slice and every pour and every gram measured without a scale, that the person who told them that had been the smallest person in any room they had ever stood in. He had not calculated for this. He had driven to Charlotte to buy a bakery. What he had found instead was a woman with $3.31 recipes and a grandmother who had hidden the future inside the lining of a purse. The scores came back unanimously. All 4 chefs rated Nkechi's food above 9 out of 10. The chin-chin received a perfect 10 from all 4, the first unanimous perfect score in the history of Adeyemi Collective's internal tastings. Gerald wrote, 23 years of cooking. I have tasted chin-chin on 4 continents. Never anything like this. Renee wrote about the cassava cake. This is not a bakery item. This is a cultural institution. Solomon offered Nkechi her own space, not a job, not a station in someone else's kitchen, her own bakery. Inside the Adeyemi Collective's newest location on East Boulevard in Charlotte's Dilworth neighborhood, a 2,200 square foot space with a full commercial kitchen, a retail counter with a marble top, and a wide glass window that looked out onto the street so that people walking by could watch her work the way people in Enugu had once watched Obiageli. The name Nkechi chose was simple. She chose it the way you choose to breathe. Obiageli's. There was no other name. 3 weeks before the bakery opened, the video from Belarus went public. Valerie Sims, the woman who had recorded Nkechi being humiliated, posted it to her social media account with the caption, "Imagine walking into Belarus with $3 thinking you can buy a cake." She tagged 3 friends. She expected laughter. She expected solidarity. She expected people to see what she had seen, a poor woman in the wrong place, and to find it funny the way she had found it funny. She was wrong about every part of that expectation. The video showed everything. The 3 crumpled dollar bills on the counter, Diane picking one up between 2 fingers. Diane's laugh, loud, sharp, filling every corner of the room. Brett's arm sweeping toward the door. Emeka standing perfectly still, gripping his mother's hand with both of his, looking up at her face to check whether she was going to break. And Nkechi, standing with her spine straight and her chin level, folding her money with the same care she would fold a letter to God, saying one sentence about her grandmother, and walking out of that bakery with more dignity than every other person in that building combined. The video reached 900,000 views in 3 days. It reached 2.4 million in 9. Valerie Sims had posted it to humiliate a stranger one more time. Instead, she had given that stranger an audience of millions. The response did not go the way Valerie expected. People were not laughing at Nkechi. They were furious for her. Thousands called Belarus to complain. The bakery's Google rating collapsed from 4.7 stars to 1.3 in 6 days. Diane Pruitt was fired. Brett Covington was suspended and quietly let go 2 weeks later. Valerie Sims deleted every social media account she had, but the video had already been saved and reposted over 400 times. Her name became a warning in comment sections. Don't Valerie Sims somebody. And then, buried in the comments, a woman did something that no algorithm could have predicted. Her name was Grace Udo. She was 58 years old, living in Silver Spring, Maryland, originally from Enugu. She did not recognize Nkechi in the video. She recognized the purse, the dark brown cloth, the small yellow flowers along the edge. She had seen that purse before. Her own mother had known the woman who made it. Grace typed a comment. "That purse, I know that purse. My mother knew the woman who sewed it. That woman's grandmother was Obiageli Nwankwo. She made the best chin-chin in the entire eastern region. Everyone in Enugu knew her name." That comment received 47,000 likes. It was the single most important sentence in this entire story. And it was written by a woman in her living room in Maryland who had no idea what she had just set into motion. Stay with me. This story is about to turn. It was not Grace Udo's comment alone that changed things. It was what happened because of it. A food journalist named David Park, 36, who wrote features for the Charlotte Observer's weekend section, saw the viral video. Then he saw Grace's comment about Obiageli Nwankwo. He followed the thread. He spent 3 days researching. He found the 2011 food blog review of Mama Obi's in Durham. He found a photograph of Nkechi in a kitchen, smiling, holding a tray of chin-chin, dated 2014. He called Solomon Adeyemi's office. Solomon, who had been watching the videos spread with the quiet patience of a man who understood exactly what was unfolding, told David everything. The scouting trip, what he had witnessed at Belarus, The sentence about the grandmother, Fatima's visit to Sugar Creek Road, the test kitchen, the 4 chefs, the scores, the bakery about to open. David wrote a 2,800-word feature. The headline read, "The woman they laughed out of Bellerose is about to open the most important bakery in Charlotte." The article ran on a Sunday morning. By Monday, there were 340 names on the opening day waiting list. By Wednesday, 1,100. By Friday, over 2,000. People from Charlotte, from Raleigh, from Atlanta, from as far as New York, all requesting a spot. Nkechi read the article sitting cross-legged on the floor of her new kitchen, which still smelled like fresh paint and cleaning solution, and the particular emptiness of a space that has not yet become what it is going to be. Emeka was beside her, drawing a picture of a cake with crayons on the back of a paper napkin. She read the article twice. She set it on the counter without saying anything. Then she stood up, washed her hands, picked up a mixing bowl, and started making chin-chin. 47 pieces, each one identical in size, each one identical in color, each one her grandmother's hands moving through hers across a distance that death had not been able to interrupt. Solomon did not own Obiageli's. That was the part people kept misunderstanding. He had structured the agreement deliberately, precisely, and over the loud objections of his own legal team. Nkechi owned 70% of the business outright. Solomon held 30% as a silent investor. No operational authority, no menu input, no branding control, no veto power. The lease was in Nkechi's name. The 31 recipes were her intellectual property, legally registered and protected by trademark. The bank account was in her name and her name alone. His lawyers told him the deal was too generous. His CFO told him it was a bad investment structure. He told them both the same thing. I have seen too many talented people handed opportunities that were really cages. Jobs dressed up as dreams, partnerships that were really leashes, equity deals with fine print that took back everything the headline gave. He looked at Fatima and said, "If she fails, it is hers. If she succeeds, it is hers. That is the only kind of freedom that counts." Fatima wrote that sentence on a yellow sticky note and pressed it onto the wall above her desk. It was still there 6 months later. Obiageli's opened on a Saturday morning in March. The sky was clear and cold, and the line stretched from the front door down East Boulevard, past the flower shop and the dry cleaner, and around the corner. Nkechi made everything herself for the first 3 days. Every 3-layer cassava cake, every batch of 47 chin-chin, every loaf of sweet potato bread, every coconut pudding, every pineapple upside-down cake. She started at 3:30 in the morning and did not stop until the last customer had been served at 6:15 in the evening. Her hands ached in places she had forgotten. Hands could ache. The base of the thumb, the inside of the wrist, the pad of skin between the index finger and the middle finger that takes the pressure when you knead dough. Her back ached. Her feet ached in a way she had not felt since the restaurant in Durham, years ago, when she was young and did not yet know that the life she was building could be taken from her by a man who confused control with love and silence with obedience. Emeka sat on a small wooden stool in the corner of the kitchen, wearing a green apron that was 4 sizes too big, eating a slice of 3-layer cassava cake with his name written on top in palm sugar icing. It was the first birthday cake he had ever had. Nkechi had baked it at 2 a.m., before the doors opened, before the line formed, before anyone was watching. Just her and the kitchen and the recipes and the memory of a woman in a wooden chair who had once tasted a cake and said, This is ready. You are not. The cake had cost her nothing but her hands, and her grandmother's 31 formulas, and 7 years of silence that were now, finally, permanently, and irreversibly over. 6 months later, Obiageli's had a staff of 9. Nkechi had trained 4 bakers personally, teaching them from her grandmother's method. Watch first, then measure, then taste, then adjust, then do it again until your hands know more than your mind. She taught a free Thursday night class called Cooking from Memory for people who had lost touch with the food traditions of their families, people carrying recipes on napkins, recipes dictated by grandmothers no longer alive, recipes remembered only as smells from childhood kitchens. Solomon funded the class through a grant. Enrollment was full every week. One of the women in the Thursday class was named Pearl Osei. She was 22. She had come to Charlotte from Kumasi, Ghana, 3 years earlier with a hospitality degree she had never used, and a ground nut soup recipe her mother had taught her on their last afternoon together. Nkechi tasted the soup. She hired Pearl as assistant baker 2 days later. Within 4 months, Pearl was running the Saturday shift alone. Above the counter, in a gold frame, hung Obiageli Esther Nwankwo's photograph, taken in 1974, standing in front of her kitchen in Enugu, wearing a green wrapper with small birds, holding a wooden spoon. Every customer who walked in saw it before they saw anything else. Nkechi never contacted Tobias. She never looked up Diane Pruitt. She never searched for Brett Covington or Valerie Sims. She never watched the video, not once, not even when Fatima showed her the view count. Not even when David Park's article was nominated for a regional journalism award. She did not need to see what had already become the foundation beneath everything she had built. The last thing she did every night, after the kitchen was clean and the ovens were cool, and Emeka was asleep in his own bed, in his own room, in the 2-bedroom apartment on Park Road that she had signed the lease for with her own name and her own money, was sit at the kitchen table, open the cloth purse, and unfold the piece of paper. She read her grandmother's words, not because she needed them anymore, because they had been waiting for her. Inside the lining, inside the cloth, across oceans and decades, through every apartment and every eviction, and every night she had believed she was nothing for exactly this long. Obiageli had known. She had known before Nkechi was ready. She had written the note and hidden it in the one thing she was certain her granddaughter would never throw away, no matter how bad things got, no matter how far she fell, no matter how loud the laughter became. Some people build empires out of money. Obiageli Nwankwo built hers out of a purse, a piece of paper, and 31 recipes written in a language the world almost forgot to listen to. She put everything that mattered inside it. And then she waited, across years, across oceans, across the distance between the living and the dead, for the right hands to finally open it. If someone laughed at you on the worst day of your life, and years later you were standing in a place they could never reach, would you want them to see you? Or would you let them live without ever knowing what you became? Leave your answer below. Subscribe to African Empire Tales. See you in the next one.